This week on the agenda, we're in Brussels to talk trade with China's ambassador to the European Union, Cong. This week, I'm at the Club de la Fondation in Brussels for an event hosted by Peking University and China's Chamber of Commerce to the EU. There are diplomats here, business leaders and academics, all talking about the evolving landscape of China-Europe economic and trade relations. Let's start by hearing from His Excellency Cong. We're here in Brussels. We're at this event that is about navigating the new era of the evolving economic and trade relationship between China and Europe. What's new about that relationship?
Well, it is actually a gradual resumption of the contacts between the two sides after the 3 years of pandemic. And I'm very glad to see that actually there is a good momentum. And I'm sure you have seen the flurry of high-level visits to Beijing last month, and in the past couple of weeks, and actually starting from December, starting from President Michel's visit to China, and then followed by senior officials and senior leaders from the European side, and now there's a good momentum for the bilateral relations. And also from the Chinese side, we also have received a number of senior level delegations to Europe. So actually this signifies a new start for the bilateral relations.
You do think that the relationship between China and the European Union is important? You've said it before.
Yes.
Why in particular? Is it all about trade?
No, it's not. Actually, as I said, indeed, in terms of trade, China and the EU are complementary towards each other. And also, actually, we are the second largest trade partners to each other. So indeed, that shows the importance. But actually, our relationship does not stop there. And in terms of the political aspect, as I said, we see Europe as an important power center in the world. It has a great role to play on the world stage. And there are so many things that China and the EU have in common. And we all advocate multilateralism, for instance. And there are global issues that China and EU are willing to cooperate in order to tackle these global issues, for instance, climate change, for one thing, and other issues like the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and also the people-to-people contact. Actually, there is a fountain of goodwill on both sides, and actually this actually constitutes the basis for good relations between the two sides.
You mentioned climate change.
Yes.
Also at this conference, they've talked a lot about the digital transformation.
Indeed.
And the links that there can be there. You know, China's big on solar farms, on wind power, and on electrification. How reciprocal do you see the relationship?
Well, actually, yes, indeed, these are new areas that China and EU can cooperate, and so actually there's quite a lot of Chinese investment in Europe in those areas. For instance, the new energy, and also the new energy vehicles, and also China is exporting the solar panel as well, and indeed Europe is also quite advanced in terms of the green technology, and we also welcome the European companies to invest in China, and also there's a great potential. All these are the new areas that China and Europe can cooperate, both in terms of the technological cooperation and also in terms of trade, which will benefit both sides, and I would say benefit the whole world.
It all makes business sense. But let's talk about some of the stumbling blocks, because the relationship between the United States and China has been under scrutiny for quite some time. You know, how do you see that playing out into the rest of 23, and how do you see it affecting the relationship that China has with Europe?
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world, And indeed, the relationship between our two countries is going through a very difficult period. But China wishes to improve its relations with all countries, including the United States. So we will be happy to see an improvement of the relationship. And
but I'm thinking of words like, decoupling,
indeed,
de-risking. How do you see
indeed.
that affecting
And
things
that
going forward?
indeed, well, as far as China is concerned, we are sincere in maintaining good relations with all countries. And I don't think it is appropriate for anyone to talk about decoupling, either from China or from any other country. And actually, I'm glad to hear that it's not only the European leaders, but also the American leaders are also saying that a decoupling is not a viable option. But de-risking, yes, people are talking about de-risking. As I said in my intervention just now, we need to put this into proper perspective. We should not exaggerate this issue. And furthermore, de-risking should not become decoupling just in another name. That is also important. But coming back to our relationship with EU, I think as I said, we see EU as an important independent partner, and it should have its own strategic autonomy, and it is only reasonable or rational or sensible for people to expect Europe to play an independent role, both in the political arena and also in the economic sphere.
You talked about 2 sessions and China's commitment to continue that high quality growth. So let's talk a little bit about China's plans to modernisation. Much discussed here too. What's your take on that modernisation? And again, what impact is that going to have on China's relationship with Europe, because we're here in Brussels, and with the rest of the world?
Actually, well, as President Xi explained, there are a number of prominent features in our Chinese modernization program. First, it's the modernization in the most populous country, and also our objective is to achieve equity, and so to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, and also it will be modernization which actually try to keep the balance between nature with nature, so and harmony with the nature, and also there is another aspect which should be we should draw our international audience to the attention. That is, our Chinese modernization path is going to be a peaceful one. It will not be through colonization, for instance, or through wars, or through pillaging the other countries, for instance. So that is, we will rise peacefully. That is important. And what is the relevance to Europe? Of course, it has huge relevance to Europe and to the world. Economically, when China modernizes, I'm sure there's huge potentials and huge opportunities for other countries like Europe. The huge opportunities for the whole world, including Europe, and economic ones, and also and in terms of the foreign policy. So when China rises peacefully, it is in the interest of the whole world. And here we also want to engage with other partners in a peaceful manner. And so that, as just now I mentioned, the global governance and so many other things, that China is willing to cooperate with other countries.
Since you mentioned it, I'm going to ask you about war, about conflicts that are taking place. You know, Ukraine is very much shaping what's happening with global supply chains, with the energy sector, and Europe and China have had very different approaches in how you've reacted to that.
Actually, for us, our position has been explained on numerous occasions. So it can be summed up in one word: peace. So we would like to facilitate peace, and for us, what is most important to have the ceasefire as soon as possible, because we want to put a stop to the senseless killing that is happening as we speak, and that is very important. So we know that there are complex reasons for this conflict, and but the differences can only be resolved through peaceful negotiation. It cannot be resolved on the battlefield. That is our firm belief. And that is why China has been talking to both sides, both to Russia and also to Zelensky, the President Zelensky of Ukraine. And I'm sure you're aware that President Xi has recently made a phone call. And actually, China is sending a special envoy to try to facilitate peace. And he's going to visit Ukraine and some European capitals, and also Russia. And so these are the Chinese efforts to try to facilitate peace, because we firmly believe that whatever differences that may exist between countries, the only viable way to resolve them is through peaceful negotiations. It cannot be through war.
Ambassador Fu, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Still to come here on the agenda from Brussels, we take a closer look at which sectors in Europe are drawing investment from China and vice versa.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN, see the difference.
Roger, read you loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and the crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Welcome back to the agenda from Brussels, where under discussion is where the real trading opportunities lie between China and the EU. Which sectors are hot and which are not? I spoke to Bernard Dewit, president of the Belgian-China Chamber of Commerce. Bernard Dewit, it's great to have you on the agenda. Now, when you come to events like this that are about forging closer trade and investment ties between China and the European Union, you look around the room. Do you like what you see?
I don't like what I see. I don't like what I see because I see so many Chinese faces, some coming directly from China, some being here in Europe, and I see not many European faces. I think it's a pity, it's a missed opportunity, because we have the opportunity to meet Chinese companies. We need the opportunity to meet Chinese economic leaders, and we don't make use of it.
So what's the sticking point? Are too many bosses believing what they read in the papers?
Well, that can be part of it. Second is also due to COVID. During 3 years, there was nearly no travels to China from European business people, politicians, and so on. Now we see it changing, but it's changing slowly. It could go a little bit faster. We see some politicians, President Macron, the German Chancellor, went to China. Many political leaders from Europe are now going back to China, and I think it's a good sign. We need also to have now more business people going back to China. What makes me more optimistic is the fact that we have a certain number of European companies present in China, and well present. They remained during the pandemic. They are still there, and they are still making profitable business. That is a good sign. The point is, maybe the challenge is more for small and medium-sized enterprises from Europe. Because what we see is that the big enterprises are there and stayed there. Small and medium-sized, left a little bit the market, the Chinese market, also because of the distance, because of some difficulties due to the pandemic. Now, the challenge, for instance, for chambers of commerce or for special platforms, is to push these small and medium-sized companies to go back to China, and also to attract some of the middle-sized companies from China to Europe, because the biggest numbers of companies in the economic world are small and medium-sized companies. So there is a big opportunity there.
So you talk about small and medium-sized firms as being the engines of growth, not just at home but abroad. Just give us a flavour of how important the relationship is between Belgium and China, but also the broader European Union. You know, what do those European companies do for the Chinese economy?
Well, what they do for the Chinese economy is the fact that they are coming to China. They are employing people, so that is good for the local economy. They are bringing some technology. We know that China in several fields is now leading, but we still have some leading companies in specific sectors in Europe, like in the green energy, in these kind of companies are there and are going to China. So there is a possibility to develop. Healthcare, we see, for instance, in China, it's a big challenge. Healthcare for senior people, for very old people. We have the habit in Europe of taking care of very old people in specific institutions. There is a certain know-how that we can bring also to China. But this being said, I'm not going to say that we are going to teach the Chinese a lesson. No way. The time is finished for that. And I think most of people in Europe understand that. We need to have exchanges on an equal basis. We can bring something, but we can learn also from the Chinese. And we can learn from the Chinese in the digital economy. I'm impressed to see, for instance, when you go to China now, don't bring coins, don't bring banknotes. You just bring your phone and make a payment through your phone.
And everyone's using it, aren't they? It's not just the bright young things, it's old and young. So that's a real digital transformation.
That is a big transformation. And I think when our Chinese friends are coming here to Europe, well, maybe they have the impression to come back in the past, because in Europe we are still used to use a bank card, a credit card, or even a banknote. This time it's nearly over, especially in the big cities in China.
So what about the other way around? Because you're talking about it being reciprocal, and you're saying, right, a lot of European companies, the big ones, are quite now embedded in terms of the Chinese economy. A lot of Chinese investment is being poured into Europe.
Definitely, a lot of Chinese investment is important. It's important the fact that they have many employees here in Europe, and that is a country can benefit from that. They bring also some technology. Let's imagine, let's see, I recently saw some big car companies from China specializing in electric cars. BYD, Volvo, Geely. This company, Geely, let's take it. Example, Volvo has a plant here in Belgium. They are making cars. It was a Swedish company. It was taken over by a Chinese company, Geely. People said at the time, "Ooh, we are going to lose our jobs. It's finished." Well, what do we see now? They are engaging more people to work in the factory. The factory is exporting from Belgium with Belgian workers. So there, I think it's a win-win situation. It's good for Geely Group because it's profitable. It's good for Belgium because they pay taxes in Belgium. They employ people, they pay social security, they respect the law. So what should we ask more?
So when you have conversations at the Chamber of Commerce with companies from around the world, China in particular, are you talking about jobs and the tax take for you? Or are you thinking about what you can give as well?
Well, I think both. Don't be naive. If I want to do business with you, well, I want to get some profit from the business I will do with you, but I also know I will bring something to you. Otherwise, you will tell me, look, Guy, you are only thinking to your own profit. I am making losses because of you. I will not do the business. So you need to have a win-win situation. And I think that is now the challenge for the coming months and years. It's to find common grounds where we can find our mutual interest. There can be some sectors called sensitive sectors where it would be limited here in Europe to European companies or even to national companies or in China to Chinese companies. We can understand that, but there are so many other sectors. So don't focus on some sectors which would be close to the others and say, by looking at that, the market is closed. Focus more on all the other aspects, on all the other sectors that are still open, that are going to grow. What is interesting also in China, I think, with my European eyes, is that when you listen to President Xi Jinping, when you look at what is written, they always say, we want to remain an open economy. That is important. At a time when people speak about protectionism, about closing borders, at the top of China, it is said, we want to remain open with an open economy. Let's use these words. Let's take it and let's make something from that. There are opportunities.
So you're saying stop focusing on the things that you know are going to be sensitive and look to the opportunities and that potential for partnership and cooperation. Which sectors do you think are really ripe for that reciprocal investment and cooperation, and which sectors could do with a little bit of a boost?
For instance, logistics. Logistics, very important sector. Here in Belgium, we have the Port of Antwerp and Zeebrugge, who are having a lot of contacts with Chinese port, where we have Chinese companies very active in these ports. We have airline companies doing cargo flights with China. Here in Liège, Belgium, we have China, a branch of Alibaba Group, having headquarters here for bringing goods with the e-platforms. These are things that are going to develop, that we have to move ahead with them. We see also, well, the digital economy. The digital economy, we need, and I think we should look more at what China is doing, because there have been many opportunities that have been created in China through the digital economy. It is growing in Europe, maybe not as fast as in China, and there could be more links.
You've mentioned the pandemic a few times as being an impediment, a bump in the road, if you like, putting the brakes on trade relations, investment, and cultural exchanges too. But the economic backdrop is complicated. The geopolitical backdrop is complicated. That plays into it too.
No, that is true, and there are a lot of challenges. And in the geopolitics, we see, for instance, that Europe is very much preoccupied with Ukraine. Ukraine for Europe is a big problem. What I see, and here I give you my personal opinion, I personally think that what China did by making a proposal concerning Ukraine was first courageous, because you know that it's easier to criticize than to bring something. To bring something that will not please everyone, but it's something positive, at least to try. Alors, we can say we don't like, we do not agree with part of it, but what would people have said if China would have said, we give all the weapons to Russia and we go to war? No, China is playing a diplomatic role, is playing a peaceful role. I think we should listen to that instead of just saying we don't want to discuss what China is proposing, at least we should listen and start a discussion with China. That is one example. There are many challenges, you see. Yes, economically, we can be also competitors. Well, that has been in the past, it will be in the future, like we have competitors within Europe. Definitely, that's the economic life, and that is good. And in competition, sometimes you make agreements, sometimes you fight, sometimes you win a market. That is the normal competition, you see.
You talk about competition, so I need to ask you about the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and how that has been described to some as being written with China particularly in mind. Do you think it changes the reputation of this openness you speak of?
Well, it's a big challenge for European companies, I would say, because this Inflation Reduction Act is in fact attracting foreign investment to the US and will have maybe a
choice foreign investment, though.
Right. Some European companies will more focus on the US market, but there also, I think, global companies will be there in China, as in the US. China, 1.4 billion people, which means consumers, which means needs for a certain number of goods, of materials, and so opportunities for European companies, even for US companies. When you look economically, the number of US companies active in China, exporting to China, is also huge, even though politically there are tensions, but economically business is going on. That is also something you don't read often, you don't listen often to.
So business goes on. Now, something else which is shaping the trade and investment relationship, not just between China and the European Union, but worldwide, is that thrust towards sustainability. And how do you think that Ursula von der Leyen's Green Deal is going to impact the economic picture?
That is the new challenges, I would say, and we have here in Europe also the words taxonomy, where companies will have to comply with stricter rules concerning sustainability, concerning green in their activities. But what we see is in China you have the same. In China, you have the same reaction of the government pushing their companies towards that. So I think there also we should have a dialogue with China on these aspects, because the problems are the same. The earth is the same. So we are here with common challenges that we need to face. The best way is to face it together. It's not easy. We are not sure to win. We all hope. And personally, I'm an optimistic, because when I see the progress that has been made in many technologies, I think we can go over. But we need the help of each other. It's not by closing the borders, working each on our little territory. No, we need to have more economic exchanges, cultural exchanges. And with that, we can hope that politically there can be also some more dialogue.
Bernard Dewit, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming soon on The Agenda, the longevity crisis. How can the global economy really cope with an ageing population? But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in Brussels, goodbye.